Good morning. I am Arthur Gonzalez, Chair of the Financial Oversight Management Board for Puerto Rico. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us today for the Oversight Board's 49th public meeting, and which is being held virtually. All 4 voting members who currently serve on the Oversight Board are here together in Puerto Rico. To begin the meeting, I would like to start with a roll call to formally determine if we have a quorum. Dr. Andrew Biggs.
Present.
Myself, present. Mr. John Nixon.
Presente.
Dr. Betty Rosa.
Presente.
Ex officio member Governor Jennifer Gonzalez, who is present by video conferencing. Welcome, Governor. We have a quorum and the meeting is called to order. As usual, I would like to ask our General Counsel, Mr. Jaime Alcore, if he'd be willing to act as Secretary for this meeting.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. I would like to welcome OMB Director Orlando Rivera Berrios and thank all government officials joining today, as well as everyone watching the live stream of this meeting via the Oversight Board's website at www.oversight.board-PR-gov. The audio of this meeting is available in English and Spanish in simultaneous translation. Additionally, the meeting is being translated into sign language. If you go to log in to English language website, the audio will be in English, and if you log in to the Spanish website, you will hear the simultaneous translation. As usual, we will be handling questions and comments from our online participants through a form that is available on our website. You can find this form on the live stream page and complete it by putting your name and adding any questions or comments you might have. You can post comments or questions until 15 minutes before the end of the meeting. We will provide answers on our website. We will also give an opportunity to address any comments we have received towards the end of the meeting. We have the following agenda items for today. Approval of minutes of public meeting and executive sessions of the Oversight Board. Administrative matters. Remarks from Governor Jennifer Gonzalez. Update from the Executive Director. An overview of the fiscal year 2027 budget process presented by the Oversight Board's Budget Management Director, Alicia Guardiola, and Puerto Rico's OMB Director, Orlando Rivera Berrios. Public commentary, other matters, and then adjournment. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of our last public meeting, which was held on May 7th, 2025. The minutes are attached to the meeting material as Exhibit A. We also need to approve the minutes from a series of executive sessions held since that public meeting. Those executive sessions were held on May 9th, May 16th, May 23rd, May 30th, June 6th, June 11th, June 13th, June 20th, June 27th, June 30th, July 7th, July 11th, August 1st, October 7th, October 17th, October 22nd, October 28th, October 31st, and November 26, 2025. The minutes of the executive sessions are attached to the meeting materials as Exhibit B. Are there any questions about the minutes? There being no questions, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to approve the minutes of the last public board meeting held on May 7, 2025, which are attached to the meeting materials as Appendix A, and the minutes of the executive sessions held on May 9th, May 16th, May 23rd, May 30th, June 6th, June 11th, June 13th, June 20th, June 27th, June 30th, July 7th, July 11th, August 1st, October 7th, October 17th, October 22nd, October 28th, October 31st, and November 26th. We've been busy. What are attached to the meeting materials is Appendix B in the form presented to the meeting.
Thank you, John. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Andrew. I would like to ask for a voice vote. First, all in favor, please say yes.
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 Those opposed, please say no. If there are any abstentions, please say abstained. All right. The motion has passed. All of the board members present having voted in favor, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next, we have a couple of routine administrative matters. Would someone make the first motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the following motion. Between the adjournment of this meeting and the opening of the Oversight Board's next public meeting, the Oversight Board may consider in executive session any and all matters that it is authorized to consider under PROMESA, including first, any certification determinations authorized by PROMESA, including certification determinations under Section 206 of PROMESA. Second, any submissions or authorizations authorized by PROMESA. And third, any filings authorized under Title III of PROMESA, in each case that are set forth as part of the vote to convene such executive session. The Oversight Board may also act by unanimous written consent between meetings in accordance with its bylaws, with such consent to include consent by electronic transmission.
Thank you, Andrew. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Would all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All of the board members present having voted in favor, the motion passes. We have one more motion which relates to the unanimous written consents. Would someone please make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to confirm and approve any unanimous written consents adopted by the Oversight Board since the adjournment of our last public meeting, which are attached to the meeting materials as Appendix C.
Thank you, John. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Andrew. Will all in favor please say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All of the board members present having voted in favor, the motion passes as well. Next, I would like to change the usual order of our public meeting, board meetings, to accommodate Governor Jennifer Gonzalez's schedule. Welcome, Governor. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today, given your busy schedule. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all members of the board, as well as the people who are listening and viewing this session. As you may know, I'm in New York, and that's the reason I'm not present live, but I'm connected via Zoom. I want to say thank you to you and all members, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on three matters that are central to our shared objectives of the fiscal responsibility, reliable public services, and a sustainable return to the capital markets. To that end, I will address that this week meetings with the credit rating agencies in New York, the progress we have made preparing the fiscal year 2027 budget under our reform budgeted process, and the completed renegotiation of the government contract with NFE. But first, I would like to highlight some of the most important achievements we have attained since taking office in energy, fiscal, and economic fronts. On an energy front, thanks to the decisive actions since day one, we have added 1,200 megawatts of new generation capacity, which is equivalent to more than 37.4% of current generation. And we have preventing the massive blackouts that has been predicted for this summer. We have 4 additional generation projects that are already underway that will modernize power production, namely 800 megawatts of temporary generation, 430 megawatts of Tesla Megapack batteries, 3,000 megawatts under Biden at this time, and approximately 600 megawatts of renewable energy plus 200 megawatts of batteries under the expedited process established through the Executive Order 2025-047. These projects, it will lower electricity cost and improve the stability of the system. And for the first time, LUMA has been truly held accountable, stopping actions that will harm the people of Puerto Rico, such as the cancellation of night crews, and laying the groundwork for justified termination of an abusive and unjust contract. On the fiscal front, we were able to jointly certify with you guys, with the Oversight Board, the first truly balanced budget since the creation of the Oversight Board in 2016. Strengthened the liquidity of the central government to ensure the government can operate adequately and while having adequate reserve for unforeseen events. And protecting SNAP and WIC benefits for more than 1.2 million residents of the island during the federal shutdown. Finally, on the economic front, we have executed our reshoring strategy. We have achieved the expansion of 17 manufacturing companies during this year, creating more than 4,000 promised jobs and injecting over $2.2 billion in our economy. Today, Puerto Rico has the highest level of construction employment in 16 years, and a non-farm payroll employment reached 966,500 jobs, an increase of 3,100 in a single month, and 14,500 in 1 year. Consistent with our commitment to transparent and continuous communication with capital market participants, our team has continued to prepare and publish reports on liquidity, economic data, fiscal matters, and reconstruction efforts. And this week we are meeting in New York with representatives of each of the principal rating agencies to provide a comprehensive update on fiscal performance, economic trends, and the reconstruction pipeline. I am personally participating in these meetings to underscore the administration emphasis on transparency, consistency, and continuity, adherence to sustainable fiscal practices, and the ongoing execution of structural reforms as we gather feedback and continue to work the work of restoring the product market access when needed. Our message is very straightforward. Puerto Rico fiscal trajectory is anchored in balanced budgets, strengthening governments, and evidence-based policy making, and our engagement seeks to align the rating agencies' forward-looking assessment with a concrete progress. We're demonstrating across fiscal management and service delivery, and in doing so, we continue institutional solution-oriented approach that has characterized our recent public communications and joint work toward PROMESA dual objectives. During the fiscal year 2027 budget process, our government has implemented a comprehensive reform of the planning and budgeting process that codifies rigorous best practices, multi-year planning, and discipline execution controls under the leadership of the Office of Management and Budget, and throughout the creation of a new budget manual and the integration of the Budget Preparation Committee, which includes FAF, the Department of Treasury, and the Planning Board, and the Department of Labor. The reform centralized macroeconomic inputs, update revenue projections through the Department of Treasury. They integrates the data intelligence system that enables real-time monitoring of budget execution, tightening the linkage between policy priorities and financial performance. For the fiscal year 2027 budget, the Budget Office initiated the budgeting process in August under a 5-year multi-annual framework, refined classifications to project the baseline from non-recurring items, and embedded a scenario-based risk management. So agencies must identify a plan for federal funding changes, operational risk, and contingencies before seeking additional resources. In addition to enhance coordination with the board, the fiscal year 2027 budgeting cycle also formalized a carta presupuestaria or the budget letter to launch the budget calendar and align agency submissions to strategic policy, certify fiscal plan parameters, and uniform technical requirements, including KPIs, implementation plans, and multi-year analysis. In parallel, we are strengthening OGP's institutional capacity through an economic and fiscal policy area that integrates forecasting, capital and debt planning, financial plan and expenditures, and federal funds, all of which constitute concrete advances in complying with the fiscal plan budget reforms. This disciplined, collaborative budgeting process is designed to safeguard fiscal responsibility and advance the post-PROMESA transition to a modern, self-sufficient fiscal administration that is aligned with best practices and capital markets expectations. Finally, I just want to highlight that the government contract with NFE, these agreements will deliver over 375 million in additional savings over a 7-year term, and critically corrects prior contractual deficiencies by allowing the port to be opened through a tolling agreement and other LNG suppliers if NFE fails to meet its contractual obligations. The negotiated terms should ultimately translate into savings for the people of Puerto Rico electricity bills. These changes advance our overreaching policy goals for the energy sector and therefore reinforce affordability for the ratepayers and fiscal sustainability, support reliability and embedded competition as a safeguard against any potential non-compliance by the company. This agreement is fully consistent with the long-standing principles we have articulated for energy. In closing, my administration is focusing on delivering results, and our engagement with the rating agencies reflects continuity and transparency in pursuit sustainable market access. The fiscal budgeting process of 2027 is embedded in those best practices, multi-year planning and real-time execution oversight, and our renegotiation of contracts advances affordability, reliability, and competition. I would like to continue to work hand by hand by the Oversight Board to ensure that our administration policies translate into tangible improvement to the daily life of the people of Puerto Rico. With that, I submit my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, for your comprehensive remarks. Would our executive director or any board member like to comment on the governor's remarks?
Mute.
All right. No comment being heard. I would like to turn the floor over to our executive director, Robert Mojica, for an overview of the Oversight Board's work since our last public meeting. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez. We are closing a calendar year with significant progress and accomplishments. We are also ending 2025 with a clear focus of what lies ahead. And we are already working intensely with the government on some of the critical priorities for 2026. Most importantly, we are working together on the Commonwealth budget for fiscal year 2027, which begins on July 1st, 2026. Already, we have moved the process forward in significant ways. The government and the Oversight Board have begun implementing a co-leadership model to develop a consensual budget in partnership with the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB. This means initiating the transfer of knowledge, processes, and responsibilities for fiscal and budget matters to the government. In previous years, the government provided data and revenue projections, but the Oversight Board determined the parameters of the government's expenses. This was important. This was an important process for handling the severe fiscal crisis, but given Puerto Rico's current stability and the Oversight Board's determination to provide a path for exit, the government is taking on more responsibility this year. This is the first step in the eventual handover of the budget process to the government, and the Oversight Board and OMB held several working sessions on how to implement this transfer of responsibility. One of the key elements of the future budget process is a switch to new accounting standards. The government and the Oversight Board are working on the implementation of modified accrual accounting principles as mandated by PROMESA. So this year's general fund budget can be the first to be developed under those stricter accounting methods. This is an important milestone on the path to fiscal responsibility and to sustain long-term stability after the Oversight Board is gone. Another element of this budget process is to introduce a capital budget in addition to the general fund budget. Capital expenditures should be clearly separated from day-to-day operating budget spending so the government can plan for long-term investments and better determine what resources are needed and when to fund long-term infrastructure investments, and separately, what is available for the operating budget. This will set the foundation for eventually returning to the capital markets. Elisa Guardiola, our Budget Management Director, and OMB Director Orlando Rivera Berrios will today present more details about the process. To develop the budget for the upcoming fiscal year and the elements of the broader budget reform that we are working on with the government to implement this year. Since the last public board meeting, the Oversight Board has taken another important step in the budget reform process. We hosted the inaugural Economic Forecast Symposium, solid projections, and a critical foundation of reliable fiscally responsible budgeting. That is why the objective of this symposium is to establish a transparent and public macroeconomic forecasting dialogue to assist the Oversight Board, the government, and the legislature in reaching a consensus on Puerto Rico's 5-year economic outlook and can inform and guide fiscal and budget planning. This symposium will be held annually, and we're already in the planning process for the event for 2026. Also, since the last board meeting, the board members have certified the Commonwealth budget for the current fiscal year, 2026. That was jointly developed by the Oversight Board and the administration of Governor Jennifer Gonzalez Colon and the Legislative Assembly. This budget could qualify as the first of 4 consecutive balanced budgets for the Commonwealth under PROMESA and represents major progress from the prior years. The budget also reflects the unprecedented uncertainty around federal funding and economic growth that the Oversight Board and the government faced earlier this year. When the budget was developed, there were significant risks, and the budget included reserves and increased holdbacks that allow for the repurposing of funds to respond to federal government policy changes. For example, the budget held back 5% of agency spending for 8 months to prevent deficits should federal funding decreases emerge. Now, well into the second quarter of the fiscal year, these federal fund reductions have not materialized, and we may well be able to release the 5% holdback soon so that the government can allocate these funds to the priorities we set together in the enacted budget. Together, we have developed a responsible budget for this fiscal year, and the government and the Oversight Board will make sure we do so again for next fiscal year. Even if some of the risks that we foresaw have dissipated, they have not completely disappeared. The federal government is working on its own budget, and though I will not attempt to predict what the outcome of that process will be, we will have to be prepared for a situation that includes reductions in federally funded programs affecting Puerto Rico. At least one risk remains well into the future: Medicaid funding. Billions in federal Medicaid funding expire in 2027, and that is Puerto Rico's fiscal year 2028. And we will probably not know for a long time whether Congress would be willing to continue the additional Medicaid contributions beyond the $500 million in Medicaid funding that Puerto Rico receives by permanent law. And if so, by how much? So we must be prepared and work with the governor to make sure that the federal government understands the implications for Puerto Rico. Since the last board meeting, we also published our annual report. It includes, again, areas of focus that will guide our priorities in the current fiscal year and beyond. We also added a second volume to the annual report this year that follows my testimony before Congress and outlines the Oversight Board's significant accomplishments for the first time in great detail, including the substantial savings we achieved for the people of Puerto Rico. In July, the United States House of Representatives Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs held a hearing to review the work of the Oversight Board, as well as the path forward. What I told members of Congress is that Promesa is working. Today, Puerto Rico is dramatically different. It is stable. I reported to Congress that the fiscal crisis and the horrific hurricanes that followed took a generational toll on the people, communities, and businesses of Puerto Rico. It is the Oversight Board's responsibility to complete Congress's mandate. Puerto Rico must not fall back into fiscal instability. That is why budget reform is a priority that we highlighted in the annual report. Institutionalizing permanent reforms is essential to sustaining balanced budgets once the Oversight Board supervision ends. The reforms described in the annual report are intended to enable the government to meet the statutory requirements of Promesa, enabling Puerto Rico to produce balanced budgets independently and sustain fiscal responsibility, regain market confidence, and prevent a return to the pre-crisis practices. One critical element, the government must return to the timely publication of audited financial statements, a key step to regain adequate access to the credit markets. Another area of focus is the Puerto Rico Department of Education, PRDE. PRDE's centralized budget model leads to inefficient, unequal fund distribution and lacks transparency. That is why PRDE and the Oversight Board have begun working on a transition to a student-based budgeting, shifting from budgeting for schools' needs to budgeting for students' needs first. And finally, the government procurement is the third area of focus. The annual report explains the biggest challenges, and the Oversight Board and the government have implemented important procurement reforms. And the Oversight Board's contract review policy is a significant safeguard. The most recent contract between PREPA and New Fortress Energy is just one example. The Oversight Board's review and subsequent changes to the contract significantly improved the terms of the agreement and saved the people of Puerto Rico $4 billion. Today, Puerto Rico still lacks some of the controls widely adopted in U.S. states, creating unnecessary fiscal risk in contracting. The annual report includes several recommendations for remediation, and the Oversight Board will work with the government on procurement integrity reform and implementation of new and additional safeguards. Volume 2 of the annual report was prepared in response to the Congressional Committee's interest in the Oversight Board's achievements since 2016 and includes data and context that demonstrate concrete results that are reshaping Puerto Rico's fiscal and economic future. Before Promesa was enacted, the government budgets were in deficit for at least 16 consecutive years. In some years, those deficits reached double digits in proportion to the overall budget, practically astronomical by public budgeting standards. Since the Oversight Board began its work, the government budget deficits have been zero. The Oversight Board has completed 12 debt restructurings, eliminating more than $55 billion in principal and interest payments to creditors. The Oversight Board has prevented legislation that would have added nearly $30 billion in unaffordable spending that would have reversed the hard-won progress to establish fiscal stability. Together with the government, the Oversight Board has certified budgets approving $20 billion in strategic investments in Puerto Rico's future. All said, the Oversight Board's actions saved every household in Puerto Rico $60,000. In financial terms, the Oversight Board's work provided a $38 return for every dollar of expense invested to fulfill the mandate of Promesa. On energy, we published two significant reports that are shedding more light on the current economic condition of PREPA's financial perils and the deficient state of Puerto Rico's electrical system. First, we published a comprehensive report about the PREPA pension system. The financial stability of the PREPA pension system has been declining for decades because of increased benefits to a growing number of PREPA retirees and their beneficiaries, and PREPA did not make the contributions necessary to keep the system solvent. And they made unrealistic asset return assumptions that were added to the problem. The report, available on our website, provides, for the first time, a full history of how the PREPA pension system was created and how it ran out of money. Second, we published an equally comprehensive report assessing the needs of Puerto Rico's energy system now and in the future. The Oversight Board decided earlier this year to engage an independent consultant to conduct a study to pressure test the estimates provided in the operators of PREPA's grid and power plants for the PREPA fiscal plan. Puerto Rico's energy system has deteriorated for decades because PREPA did not make the investments needed to maintain and modernize the grid and power plants. One of the most important conclusions of the independent analysis is this, and I quote from the report: "Anywhere else in the U.S., the normal state of the grid in Puerto Rico would elicit a state of emergency declaration." End of quote. In recognition of this fact, the U.S. Department of Energy issued 2 emergency declarations to expedite repairs to the system. I further quote from the report: "Without accelerated and substantial corrective measures, system reliability and performance will continue to degrade, increasing the frequency, duration, and breadth of outages for PREPA's customers." End of quote. The findings in the report support the conclusion that the funding requested in the PREPA fiscal plan is justified, given the grid's condition and the scale of work required to stop the long-term decline. Ensuring adequate investment now is essential to stabilizing the system and build a reliable grid and power generation for Puerto Rico's needs. The 2 reports are important to explain PREPA's broken system and financial distress, and PREPA's historic failure to serve the people of Puerto Rico. I encourage everyone to read the reports published on our website. And finally, you, the members of the Oversight Board, last month approved the revised, significantly improved contract between PREPA and the P3 Authority and New Fortress Energy to supply Puerto Rico with liquid natural gas, or LNG. This was the largest contract the Oversight Board reviewed under its contract review policy. The contract review policy established under PROMESA is an essential element of Puerto Rico's recovery and path to fiscal responsibility. The New Fortress contract illustrates why the Oversight Board's review of government contracts is as essential as our work with the government to reform the procurement process and the budget process. The contract was deficient when it was submitted to us for review. We are not a party to the contract, and we were not part of the negotiations. The negotiation of contracts is a matter of responsibility for governing and execution. Our role is oversight, not contracting. Yet when the contract was submitted, we immediately realized, even before a full review, that deficiencies were stark. The initially proposed 15-year contract, with an estimated value of approximately $20 billion, would have locked Puerto Rico into a long-term commitment with a single supplier for an annual contracted quantity of LNG Puerto Rico may have never needed. During its review, the Oversight Board identified significant inconsistencies between the request for proposals, lack of market competition, a material conflict of interest, given that Genera Puerto Rico was to be PREPA's exclusive representative administering the contract with its own parent, NFE, and several contract provisions that were unfavorable to PREPA and the people of Puerto Rico. No government party was able to justify or willing to explain the rationale underlying the more problematic proposed terms. The government immediately withdrew the originally proposed contract and submitted a new revised contract. The new contract also raised concerns, but nearly all of the Oversight Board's concerns raised in the original and the new contract were eventually addressed and after considerable scrutiny, the Oversight Board was able to approve it. Given the port's lease agreement with NFE and the failed attempts to identify alternative LNG suppliers, a rejection of the proposed contract from the Oversight Board would leave the island with insufficient LNG supply and consequently less available, affordable generation. Throughout its review, the Oversight Board and the government emphasized the need to ensure uninterrupted access to the San Juan terminal in the event of NFE's failure to deliver LNG. And pursuant to the port's lease agreement that the governor mentioned earlier, NFE holds exclusive rights over the Puerto Nuevo port in San Juan, where it has constructed LNG import and handling facilities. And since the Puerto Nuevo port is the sole entry point for delivering LNG to these units, any disruption in access would pose a direct and immediate risk to the reliability of Puerto Rico's electrical system. As we are looking forward to 2026, we hope that we will move forward with PREPA's debt restructuring. The U.S. District Court this week already set a schedule for the administrative expense claim proceedings, and we hope that we will be able to proceed with the plan of adjustment as well, hopefully resolving Puerto Rico's last bankruptcy in the course of the next fiscal year. Progress with the debt restructuring for PREPA, the transition to the annual budget process to the government, the critical work on broad budget reform to strengthen Puerto Rico's fiscal responsibility over the long term will be our main focus next year. Considering the significant steps that we have made together with the government this year to move forward Puerto Rico, I am confident that in 2026 we will have another successful year for Puerto Rico's path towards fulfilling the mandate of Promesa and for the fiscal responsibility and stability and the people of businesses of Puerto Rico depend on. Thank you, Chair Gonzalez.
Thank you, Robert. I will now open the floor to any questions or comments the board members would like to make.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just, as a board member, express appreciation. Obviously, there's a lot of work that's gone on over the last several months with respect to budget reform, and I know we're going to talk more about that, and I'm excited with that, and also with the NFE contract. There were hundreds of hours that were put into getting that contract to a place where it would be right by the Puerto Rican folks who are paying the electricity bills and relying on the power generation that's so needed on the island. I know that it took some time, but I appreciate our staff's commitment and dedication to it. I appreciate the government, working with us on getting that contract to an acceptable place. And we're really hopeful that we can move forward now and make sure that we continue to, improve the electricity system and the environment here on the island as we work through the bankruptcy with PREPA and everything else that we're dealing with. But I just want to appreciate Fausto and his team and the group who's been working tirelessly on helping us get to where we are.
Anyone else? There being no further comments, I would like to turn the floor over to Elisa Guardiola, our Director of Budget Management, and Orlando Rivera Berrios, the Director of Management and Budget for Puerto Rico, for an overview of the budget process for the coming fiscal year 2027. Ms. Guardiola, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chairman Gonzalez, board members, Director Mujica, Governor Gonzalez, and Budget Director Rivera Berrios. Thank you for being here today, and thank you as well to the members of the public who are listening in. We are here to present the fiscal year 27 Commonwealth budget process and the collaborative reform efforts that are shaping Puerto Rico's fiscal future. This presentation marks a significant milestone in our journey towards fiscal sustainability and self-governance. It reflects a shared commitment between the government of Puerto Rico and the Oversight Board to build strong, resilient public finance institutions that can sustain balance, transparency, and accountability long after the Oversight Board work is complete. This is the public launch of the fiscal year 27 budget process development. For the first time since the Oversight Board existence, the government of Puerto Rico is taking the lead in developing the budget. The Oversight Board is supporting this transition by strengthening the government's capacity, tools, and systems. PROMESA was enacted to restore fiscal responsibility and provide a pathway back to capital markets access. Since Section 209 of PROMESA outlines the standards of the Oversight Board's termination. This include 4 consecutive years of balanced budgets under modified accrual accounting standards and adequate access to markets at reasonable terms. These are not just technical requirements. They are the foundation for long-term fiscal independence. The Oversight Board role is evolving. We are moving from direct oversight to a focus on capacity building. This includes sharing best practices in budgeting and forecasting, supporting risk identification and mitigation, providing strategic insights based on historical and comparative analysis, and institutionalizing permanent budget reforms that are essential to sustaining balanced budgets. The goal is to ensure that Puerto Rico has the institutional strength to maintain fiscal responsibility independently without external oversight. Let's now look at how this collaboration has taken shape through concrete actions and milestones. As the governor previously mentioned, since August 2025, we've held over 16 working sessions. These sessions brought together leadership and technical teams from the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, and the Oversight Board. More than 15 deliverables have been produced, ranging from analytical tools to planning frameworks. These sessions cover key topics such as budget targets, risk analysis, special revenue fund projections, and the development of the fiscal year 27 budget letter. On November 18th, OMB issued the fiscal year 27 budget letter, formally launching the process. This moment represents more than a procedural milestone. It reflects the government's leadership and ownership of the process. It also highlights the deep collaboration and transparency that has defined our joint efforts. In just a moment, the OMB director will walk us through the government's vision, priorities, and next steps for the fiscal year 27 budget. His presentation will provide further insight into how this process is being led and implemented by the government of Puerto Rico. The fiscal year 27 budget process is being developed under a co-leadership model between OMB and the Oversight Board. This marks a significant shift towards government-led fiscal management. The process is structured around 4 key areas: establishing realistic budget targets aligned with fiscal sustainability, conducting a comprehensive analysis of liabilities and risks, developing a clear budget policy framework and request for information process, and improving forecasting methodologies for special revenue funds. This approach ensures that the budget is not just balanced, but also resilient. Our sessions followed a phased approach. We began by building a shared understanding of the fiscal plan, budget targets, and risk management. We used data-driven tools and analysis, such as year-over-year comparison, liquidity reports, and risk tracking, to inform decisions. As alignment was established, the sessions evolved into deep dives, enabling more detailed analysis, tool development, and targeted problem solving. This foundation has been critical to supporting the fiscal year 27 budget planning process. We've identified several areas for continued collaboration and support. First, jointly identifying and analyzing risks with agencies. This includes maintaining communication around operational, policy, and legislative changes that may impact agency budgets. Second, developing mitigation strategies. High priority risks must be addressed through the fiscal year 27 budget process development and to ensure alignment with fiscal targets and sustainability goals. Meanwhile, low priority risk should be jointly monitored and managed throughout the fiscal year as part of our ongoing collaborative efforts. This include mid-year adjustments, reapportionment, or other responsive measures that maintain service continuity while upholding budget discipline. Third, implementing permanent budget reforms. This include prioritizing permanent financial discipline and modern fiscal management practices by establishing a financial plan and a comprehensive budget framework, maintaining communication to pass centralized government finance law, consolidating all finance and budget provisions, and advancing the adoption of modified accrual accounting, starting with developing, certifying, and monitoring the fiscal year 27 Commonwealth General Fund budget under these principles. These reforms are essential to institutionalizing fiscal discipline. Looking ahead, our shared commitment is to build strong institutions that can sustain fiscal responsibility beyond the Oversight Board's presence. The Oversight Board will issue the official fiscal year 27 budget schedule and revenue estimates early next year. Together, we aim to certify a budget that reflects fiscal discipline, sustainability, and Puerto Rico's path to self-governance. As we've said before, true fiscal independence will be achieved when transparency, accountability, and balance are permanent features of government. Public engagement and transparency are essential to building trust and accountability. This collaboration is a milestone in the transition to self-governance. We are proud to be part of it. Now I'm going to switch to English. So, para concluir, pues.
And in closing, I want to thank, first of all, the OMB director and the Oversight Management Board, as well as the OMB staff that has worked with us every week. To the Oversight Board and all of the agencies, I would like to thank them for their dedication and hard work. We look forward to continued progress and to build a stronger and more resilient Puerto Rico. Thank you. And now I give the word to the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Mr. Orlando Rivera Berrio.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Elisa, for all of the work that you've done together, and to the members of the board. I'm going to be making the presentation regarding all the work we've done during 2025, the achievements that have been implemented through our governance plan, the Honorable Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, through a strategic planning which has been adopted through the integration of various agencies and the use of modern tools of fiscal analysis and implementation of guiding principles. The government seeks to improve public governance and move towards a greater efficiency, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. These achievements have been done through the creation of an interagency committee preparing the budget. If you recall, the meeting that was held by the board in the month of December of 2024, one of the findings was that the government had decentralized the budgeting process into various agencies. In the month of March, the Honorable Governor issued an executive order, 2025-011, created an interagency committee to prepare the budget, to be able to work on all of the issues that these agencies work on in preparing a budget, emphasizing the OGP, or OMB in English, from being presiding the committee, to be able to centralize all this work that was done by the various agencies and then deal with the findings that the board had made over years. The vision that we've had and will be presenting to explain the priorities of the 2027 fiscal budget, which is directed to the guiding principles that we've established in a budget manual. We'll also be presenting the next steps of the various meetings that we'll be having with the various agencies in cooperation with the Fiscal Oversight Board. As I mentioned, Order 2025, Executive Board created an interagency committee composed by Office of Management and Budget, AFAF, the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Labor, and the Planning Board. This committee was able to prepare a budget master plan which is divided in 4 phases. The first phase is related to projections of revenues and macroeconomic study. We're trying to get the OMB to take ownership and improve the budget projections made by the various entities and challenge their work. Currently, the budget for fiscal year 2027, we are working with the macroeconomic studies from the fiscal plan of 2024. Phase 2, related to preparing and developing budget planning. So phase 3 is presenting an approval of the budget to the Legislative Assembly and to the Fiscal Oversight Board with the goal of having it certified before June 30th, 2026. And above all, phase 4, which for us is the most important, which is the budget execution through monitoring of the day-to-day operations through reports and monitoring the expenses in real time. Part of the achievements of this committee is to sending the goals for fiscal year 2027, the OMB being the owner of the start of the process. We started in the month of August. And the purpose of starting since before then was to have more time for analysis in the budget requests. We've seen how the board has pointed out for years that the schedule of the budget requests is a calendar with a very short time, which does not allow adequate analysis by the government and by the legislature. So the goal for this fiscal year 2027 is that we can submit with sufficient lead time the budget for 2020, so we have greater time for analysis of these budget requests. Another achievement of the manual is, which was created to implement the various best practices. I want to mention that part of the budget goals were prepared through the elimination of non-recurring finance decisions approved during fiscal year 2026. The incorporation of the increase of cost of utilities aligned with the fiscal plans of the Public Electric Power Authority and the Aqueduct and Sewer Authority, updating the elements of the plan of adjustment, including the debt of general obligations and the instruments of contingent value instruments and the contributions to the trust of reserves for pensions. And we want to respond to the Ersman Ainge that the board did not know the budget expenses in real time. We acknowledge that the new ERP and that the government is making a serious effort to be able to comply with this implementation. Nevertheless, since we arrived, we understood that we could not wait for this implementation, and we developed the known as SID, is the Data Intelligence System, which responds to the need of the Office of Management to be able to monitor real-time the expenses by the agencies in the face of the certified budget. Previously, the Office of Management depended on the agency to submit manually the use of the budget, that the data was not updated, and that they weren't reliable. Through the Data Intelligence System, we have integrated automatically into the current financial systems and receive on a day-to-day basis the use of the budget. The goal is that by the beginning of fiscal year 2027, we can include all of public corporations that are outside the central government. The data intelligence system doesn't just monitor the expenses, but also it monitors the roster of the agencies in terms of the payroll. We acknowledge this is one of the highest expenses the government has, and with this tool, we'll not only be able to monitor it, but we'll also have variances to be able to raise any red flags in the use of the government budget. Part of the fiscal policies and program policies in compliance with our governors, Jennifer Gonzalez governance plans, we created 6 priorities. for the 2027 budget. We will be focused on the area of health to deal with programs for senior citizens. We seek to accelerate the modernization of the physical and digital infrastructure to improve accessibility and capacity of the Puerto Rico government's health system. We will dealing with priority the public safety, training, and acquiring technological equipment and improving the physical facilities of all components of public safety. We will be dealing with and giving priority to critical infrastructure, specifically the four principal sectors: telecommunications, energy, transportation, and water. With regards to public service, we will be continuing with the implementation of the public service reform, where we seek to be able to recruit the best talent available through artificial intelligence, and the whole project that's been carried out in the last few years in the reform of public service. In terms of education, we're carrying out changes in budget methodology to ensure that the budget reaches students directly. And above all, one of the priorities and plans of our governor is the area of taxes, where we will be presenting in due time a tax reform. And starting now, we're seeking for the way for this to be a neutral, fiscally responsible tax reform. For 2027, in the budget manual that was created, is based on 6 guiding principles, and all budget requests that agencies present have to be aligned with these 6 guiding principles. Fiscal responsibility to ensure balanced budgets that are sustainable and in compliances with the provisions of the fiscal plan. We're looking for a multi-annual focus approach that we can create a 5-year budget and no expenses looking forward. Based on the projections of revenues that we have available, we have established an inventory of risk and fiscal challenges, internal as well as external risks, to be able to identify the necessary resources to be able to deal with those future risks. Part of the guiding principles to identify which expenses are recurrent and which ones are not. We've seen how for years the government has budgeted recurring expenses with non-recurring funds. The manual that has been created and the implementation of these best practices requires all agencies that their budget requests identify which expenses are recurring and which ones are not, seeking fiscal neutrality. Any fiscal or budget change must be neutral in its net impact on public finances, avoiding initiatives generating deficits or compromising the government's long-term fiscal sustainability. As part of the processes we have implemented to deal with all the recommendations that have been made by the board for years, we implemented the best practices through the creation of a budget manual. This was done analyzing the budget guides of other jurisdictions such as New York, Delaware, Iowa, and Maryland. We also evaluated Circular A11 from the OMB of the federal government. This created the budget manual, which is aligned with 7 best practices globally. A multi-annual focal, rigorous classification of recurring and non-recurring expenses, attending budgetary risks, reserves and budget control, indicators of performance indicators, where each request of initiative by the government has to be linked to key performance indicators. For example, if the funds are requested for recruiting for public service, that request has to be accompanied with a recruitment plan. Likewise, with permanent funds for permanent improvements, it has to be mandatory, accompanied by an inspection plan. The OMB, through the implementation of the plan, will provide the guides to the agencies to be able to create these plans. Previously, the OMB issued a budget letter, which is the beginning of the budget cycle. This year, we implemented the budget manual to implement the best practices, and we prepared a budget letter changing the methodology so that it would be addressed only to notifying what the public policy is regarding the budget for that fiscal year. This start of the budget cycle emphasizes efficiency, transparency, discipline, and results. All budget requests for the fiscal year 2020 has to be addressed to the government strategic plan, to compliance with the fiscal plan, and to the budget's goals established in our analysis. So we're seeking efficiency and results to be measurable. On the other hand, the budget letter established some parameters and restrictions that we want to implement in the fiscal 2027 budget. Every agency must request in the payroll area its current, according to the roster they currently have, and any additional request will have to be accompanied by that recruitment plan. In the area of OPEX, operational expenses, each agency is being required to reduce its expense by 5% in the areas of professional services and purchased services. All information has to be identified as to whether it's a recurring or non-recurring expense. The budget manual establishes in Chapter 3 5 essential elements to be able to identify whether these expenses are recurring or not. On the other hand, the Office of Management in its manual establishes 5 categories of risk. And we have established an internal and external risk inventory, long-term and short-term, in cooperation with the Fiscal Oversight Board. The purpose of identifying these risks is to be able to deal with them efficiently and transparently in the preparation of the budget. These risks include any reduction of federal funds in the future, Medicaid, the implementation or updating of the classification fund of the public service reform, the tax reform, among others. And part of the instructions that were given to the agencies in the budget letter to reduce their expenses by 5% is to be able to address the various risks that we are identifying. Now, as part of all this work that has been performed, this is part of the budget reform that we're implementing in the OMB. In addition to everything that we have mentioned, the Fiscal Oversight Board approved several months ago a organizational restructuring at the OMB to create the area of economic and fiscal policy, which integrates the following divisions: economic and forecast, capital planning, dealing with the debt, financial planning expenses, and division for federal funds. This is the purpose of continuing to strengthen the functions of the OMB and to be able to achieve fiscal responsibility long and short term. As steps to be taken, on November 18th, the budget goals for 2027 were issued. Between the 8th and 16th of December, we're carrying out independent meetings with all of the agencies in which the Fiscal Oversight Board's team is participating along with us. From the 19th of December is the deadline for all agencies to submit their budget requests addressed to the budget goals that have been delivered. And from December 20th through January 15th, we will be having agents with the largest agencies to discuss those budget requests. And finally, we will be submitting the budget for fiscal year 2027 to the Fiscal Oversight Board and the Legislative Assembly as published and required at its deadlines according to Section 202 of PROMESA. It's been a pleasure for me to be part of the Office of Management Budget and to work as a team with all of you and to improve and execute the governance plan of our governor, whose priority in that government plan is to improve the budget metrics. Thank you very much. Gracias a ambos.
Talks and presentations.
Gracias a ambos por su presentación.
Would any board member or our executive director like to comment on the presentations?
I definitely would, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this is something that I'm very passionate about, being a former budget director for a couple of states. And really, this is the reason why I joined the board, to really help solidify the budget process within the Commonwealth. Obviously, we know that the bankruptcies are one thing, and getting through them and solving those are obviously, you know, a lot of what we do, but also laying the groundwork so we have fiscal sustainability in the future is very important, and I think is equally as important to what we're doing with the restructurings, because we need to be able to pay the debt that we agree to, right? And if we have a budget process and a fiscal house of cards, it's not going to happen. So I just want to thank Orlando and Elisa and all the hard work that's been going on. I love to see the transformation. I mean, obviously the board's not going to be here forever, and we need to talk about the transition. I talked with the governor about this a few months ago. We were in Washington, D.C., and we sat down and had a good chat about this. And obviously, having run the budget office, like I said, in a couple of states, I really understand the role that you play as the budget director and the importance in the future success of this island and your team. And so I'm really pleased to see this transitioning happening. I really appreciate the presentation you put together, and I'm really pleased that you're taking the lead on the development this year, because obviously much of what the FOMB is doing right now will need to transition to your office. And I believe as a board member, again, I'm partial because I'm a budget guy, but I think that's probably one of the most key foundations to the future success of the Commonwealth and building a future for its people. So I look forward to working with you on that. I think we've got an A+ team. I know we're really looking to build capacity within your agency so you can do this and make sure we have a smooth transition. So not really a question, but just congratulations. Thank you for all the great work you're doing, and we really look forward to working with you to make sure this happens.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Robert?
First, I want to thank you both. I think you're the right leaders to be doing this, you and the teams behind you. Lack of fiscal discipline, lack of a budget process is why the board exists. And this is the foundation for everything going forward. We need to build a budget process that survives, not just that survives the board, but actually survives the administrations, something that's permanent. I have a bias because I'm a former budget director. I lived and breathed this stuff, and the board's been able to stabilize this where we are today, and we're in a good place. But this transition is going to be the critical part to determine if this whole process, has worked and will put Puerto Rico in a position going forward. As the governor pointed out, being able to re-enter the capital markets is also going to be conditional about your ability to do this transition and the ability to put the permanent budget reforms in place that are in law so that other people can unwind all the good things that you are doing. So we want to make sure this never happens again. This is the step to doing that. I'm really encouraged by the cooperation that exists between the teams. We aren't going to always agree on things, but this is the beginning of that process, and I think I'm looking forward to next year's budget, getting that done, and seeing how we can make permanent the changes that we're doing and encourage what you're doing with that office. So thank you. This is probably the most important thing that we do. It is the last step of what we do. After, we have the bankruptcy, finish this part, get this done, And then we look forward to being able to put Puerto Rico on a better foundation going forward. So thank you.
Any other comments? There being no further comments or questions, we have now concluded this, the substance of today's meeting. I understand we received a couple of questions through our online comment portal, and the Oversight Board will post answers to those questions and comments on our website. I would like to thank Robert, our staff, Governor Gonzalez and her administration, and all of you for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be handling any additional comments and questions through the Oversight Board website. Does any board member have any other matter to discuss today? Since we have no other matters to cover, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Andrew. Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you, John. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All of the board members present have been voted in favor. The meeting is now adjourned. I invite you to join us for the press conference to follow. Thank you all very much.
Conference now. If you have any questions, you can write them on the chat box or raise your hand in the Zoom link. Vamos a empezar con la primera. Veo la primera mano for Luis. ¿Me escuchas, Luis?
Ahora, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, go ahead.
Two questions. One, and Mr. Mojica, I think the first time I've making reference to the exit of the board. I know there's still a process that you have described here, which is a process which now acquires another dimension and moves on to another stage. Could you tell the people of Puerto Rico, according to this plan, when this board will cease? No es la
Before, Promesa has requirements for the exit of the board in Section 209, right? 4 consecutive balanced budgets and access to the credit markets. And I think, as the governor pointed out, and we've pointed out, when we enacted the last budget, the one that we're currently in, and we said at that time, right, that could be the first of 4 consecutive balanced budgets. Access to the credit markets is also critical. And what we've said before is the first part was to stabilize the budget, get the budgets balanced, and then they've been balanced under cash. PROMESA requires them to be balanced under modified accrual. We hope that this one was balanced under modified accrual as well. And then you have to get 3 more budgets, and during that time, we should get access to the credit markets at the same time. So that is what we're working towards. That's why this presentation today was really important, to kind of show we need to transition the budget process. That's going to take time, but we need to transition it to from the board being the central driver to the government being the central driver, and the board moving more into a supervision role, and set up the accounts and the budget process so that you can regain access to the capital markets, which includes setting up a capital budget, having a capital plan, as the budget director mentioned, doing 5-year plans. These are all in our annual report, and we've published this before. We published it again this year. But the board this is the final stage. And while that's happening, we believe we'll finish with the PREPA Title III proceedings, and those will be the final stages. So it's been consistent. Maybe we haven't said it enough, but this is the final stage. And those are the final requirements, which are in law. So they're not new requirements. They're what in Section 209 of PROMESA.
Okay, so no se puede dar una fecha.
Bueno, le toca al gobierno.
And the governor, I think, is working very hard, and I believe she wants to have 4 consecutive balanced budgets in her term. We do need to have the audited financial statements done, because those certify that the budgets are actually balanced under modified accrual. But if we have 1 budget, we have 3 more, and then during that time, we expect that we would have access to the credit markets and all the other provisions done, and be done with PREPA.
Mi otra pregunta es,
The question is to all members of the board. Looking to the future, do you foresee the need for implementing needs for legal consequences in case that a government official deviates from fiscal discipline that's been implemented?
That hasn't been discussed. We haven't spoken about that at all. And look, fiscal discipline, it's a complicated thing, right? To talk about what fiscal discipline actually is. The same challenges that Puerto Rico faces are challenges that other states face during times of fiscal crisis. And there are choices. Those are not criminal matters, and those are not, these are matters of fiscal responsibility. And what happens is what happened in 2016. So what we're trying to do is put safeguards in place so that there are guardrails to prevent these kinds of things to happening, and that people know when they're happening, so you don't have 16 consecutive years of unbalanced budgets. But there's never been a discussion about, putting specific sanctions in place.
Muchas gracias. Continuamos. Que sepan el orden. Vamos.
Thank you very much. And we continue with Guillama, Alex, and then Kateria, and then Will Neris. Manuel from Nuevo Dia, go ahead.
Greetings. Mr. Mojica, you and the governor also mentioned on several occasions, you made reference to the new Fortress Energy contract recently approved. What safeguards exist from the Fiscal Oversight Board's perspective to guarantee the supply of fuel and the guarantee that the power generating plants, in case in the next few months or weeks, they're declared insolvent? Hay una disposición en el contrato.
It included, and the board wanted included in the contract, that says that in the event that New Fortress can't supply fuel, they have to enter into an agreement for someone else to supply fuel. We thought that was critically important because New Fortress has control of the port. And in the absence of terminating that contract, if they can't supply, no one else would have access. And this is not something that we're speculating on. It has happened. So what was required in the contract, the board required it and the government required it as well, is that in the event that they cannot provide, the government will have the ability to bring someone else in. And in that contract, there's a tolling agreement, there's provisions in the contract that outline how another supplier would be able to do this. Now, this requires New Fortress to act in good faith in the event that this happens, because what it requires is for them to enter into an agreement. What the contract has is the outlines of what that agreement are and what those terms should be, but it will require New Fortress to act in reasonably. And if they don't, then the government will be able to enforce those provisions and they won't be in compliance with the contract. And again, that we think that's the best that we could do when you consider that New Fortress has control over the port on a long-term lease.
La otra parte de la pregunta era con relación a las plantas generatrices. Que
Part of the question has to do with the power generating plants, which allows for the automatic cancellation in case of bankruptcy, and also in the case of the gas supply. Are those provisions in case of non-compliance by New Fortress? Do you believe that they are a long-term solution in case New Fortress is unable to provide gas for long periods of time? Or is it function mostly to ensure supply for short periods?
In short term, and it was our understanding during the discussions with P3 that they would start to speak to alternative providers to get those kinds of agreements in place so that there wouldn't be a big gap, whether it be short term or whether it would be long term. And we do believe that these provisions, even if New Fortress had financial difficulty and the bankruptcy courts, it would be subject to the bankruptcy court, but those provisions would survive and they would be able to prepare a tolling agreement and deliver even in the event that they entered into either bankruptcy proceedings or some other proceedings. We don't know. We haven't had those specific discussions with them. We read about their financial condition, from what we hear in the press.
Muchas gracias.
What about the generation fleet, the Genera generation fleet? What are the contingencies in that regard?
In terms of what with regard to the generation fleet?
El contrato de Genera no dispone que se puede cancelar.
Contract generate says it can be canceled if New Fortress goes into bankruptcy. If that could, what plan would there be in order to ensure power generation if that were to occur?
And Genera right now is the operator of the generation fleets. So if the question is if New Fortress is in bankruptcy, would the Herneta contract would continue, and the same thing, they would still continue to operate those and be subject to bankruptcy proceedings. No one is, again, we have not crossed that bridge, but that contract continues even in the bankruptcy. I don't know if the judge has any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on what happens in terms of what kind of bankruptcy may be filed. And if it's a restructuring of New Fortress, and New Fortress is going to operate during the bankruptcy, that's one thing. If it were to be, and I have no reason to believe it would be, a liquidation of New Fortress, then clearly they wouldn't be operating their contracts. But I think it's far afield right now to speculate at what it may look like at that moment in time if it ever were to happen.
Okay.
But certainly I think all parties will, prepare themselves as best they can to address the issue if it were to occur.
Thank you, Judge. Vamos a pasar por la próxima pregunta.
Alex?
Cyber News.
Ready, voy a ver. Sí, le voy a hacer la
I'm going to be asking questions, consecutive questions. The first one is, you were talking about the issue of the contracts and how the board and the board's intervention has helped to avoid probable subcontracting problems. What do you think of the fact, for example, that the government of Puerto Rico signs a contract, in this case with Luma Energy, and at the same time goes to court to challenge its own contract and declare a cause unconstitutional? Does that help in the process of doing business in Puerto Rico? Second question is, can you explain how the budget issue is going to change in the Department of Education? You said it's going to be done through budgeting for student expenses by student versus how it is now. And finally, the third question, is there any administrative issue that you consider important to resolve prior to concluding this fiscal year? Okay.
In the reform, in terms of, and I'm speaking as a commissioner of the state of New York, the important thing is to focus on the individual student's needs. And obviously, every student's need, cada estudiante tiene necesidades.
Every student has a different need, and so we need to get ready in order to create programs and invest for those students, specifically when we're dealing with students who have special education needs and others. So it is extremely important that this it's a reflection upon the needs of the schools, but more specifically, the students' needs.
Look at student-based and then do the modeling of the various needs based on those needs.
And part of what we found
Lo que nosotros allá
was initiated is there was a big disparity between schools. And some schools received a lot more funding than other schools, more for historical reasons than because of the needs of the school. And as student population has changed, some of these budgets haven't changed. And the proper way to do student budgeting would be to have money based on, as Commissioner mentioned, money based on what the students' needs are, so that there is fairness and equity in the funding formulas, and frankly, transparency. Because when asked, why does this school have 50 students and they receive 50% more funding than this other school with 50 students, there really isn't an answer except it's because we've always done it that way. That's part of that reform.
Yeah, and Robert, the other part that I think is very intentional and very focused is the the issue of weighted, based on those needs. That's exactly what I look at per school, per district, versus, just looking at, a general number of students that are in that space. Because you may have general numbers, but the individual needs in those spaces, in those schools, in the district are very different.
So, and it doesn't, and just to be clear, it's not, the whole budget is not decided in that way. A portion of it. And these things happen over time, and you look at a portion of the budget and say, this is the base amount. Base amount should follow the student. Obviously, there are other considerations. How much is the school upkeep cost? How much is the building cost? Those are other factors that you have to consider. So it's complicated and it'll take time, but you have to start. And that's the process that we want to work with PRD, and hopefully we get to a point where there's something that you could execute on. On the issue of the LUMA contract, when we review the contracts, we're looking for whether it promotes market competition and whether it's consistent with the fiscal plan. So the issue with regard to liability at the time we were reviewing it did not violate the fiscal plan, and I don't believe it weighed in as to whether or not there was market competition with regard to that clause. So the board wasn't discussed with the board when that lawsuit was initiated, nor how it proceeded. So right now, I think PREB is reviewing it. There are appeals that could take place. So that's where that stands. But it wasn't something that the board would have accepted or rejected, because it wasn't an issue of consistency with the fiscal plan or market competition. And with the third question?
Can you repeat it, Alex? ¿Lo puedes repetir?
La pregunta que queda pendiente, si en lo que queda
Pending is whether in the remainder of the year there's any administrative issues that consider important to take care of.
This year, or are you talking about long term?
In what's remaining of 2025.
Very close to the end of we're very close to the end of the year. We're still reviewing, we're reviewing contracts. We're working on the administrating of the budget. There are always things that come up, but there's nothing specifically that we are talking about getting done before the end of the fiscal year. The legislature's not in session, so just the general administration of the budget, approving of contracts, and just keeping government running, working with the government.
Gracias, Robert. Continuamos. We continue with Catirias.
Thank you, Robert. We continue with Katiria.
Estás en mute.
Hola, buenos días. Ahora sí. Hola.
Hello and good morning. I am Katiria from Noticentro. I would like to know, how open is the board to discuss a tax reform, and what are the limits? What areas could or not be dealt with?
Hasn't put a restriction on what you can and can't do. It has to be consistent with the fiscal plan. I think the budget director earlier mentioned the issue of budget neutrality, of being fiscally responsible. We're speaking with the government, and we hope to be able to, work with them, see a plan, and be able to work cooperatively with them on whatever they want to advance.
Más temprano en la conferencia.
Earlier this morning in the conference, you talked about the calculation that you came up with each dollar that was invested on the board, that the country has saved $38, and the $60,000 per household. How did you reach that number? Let's explain.
The debt, all right? So a big part of that number is the reduction in the overall debt. And all of this is in the annual report that we released last month in detail. So it is the amount of money that was decreased, that the debt was reduced, the amount of debt service that was reduced, the amount of spending that we did not approve and that was going to be approved, number of households, divided by the number of households, is how we got to those numbers. But you can look in the annual report and we can get it to you, and it's very clear as to how we got to those numbers based on the overall amount that the board has spent.
Y ya para terminar.
And just to finish, how do you foresee the legal battle that is ensuing with the U.S. government, where the president is trying to validate the dismissals from the board? How will this legal process impact the negotiation of the PREPA debt and the process in the bankruptcy court?
Josh, you want to answer that?
It's unclear as to what its impact would be. Obviously, it happened. People are aware of it, and they will react to it. But exactly how it impacts negotiations to go on in the future, resolutions of any kind, it's very hard to predict.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Continuamos con...
And now we move on with El Vocero, Marielis. Hello, I'm Wilmaris Agosto from El Vocero. I have a few questions, and I'm going to ask them at once. Since you started talking about Trump's dismissals, that's one of my questions. I want to know what the opinion is of the members of the board when Trump challenged this appeal in court, and what initiatives of economic development are you contemplating so that Puerto Rico will be less dependent on federal funds? And thirdly, in terms of the bankruptcy of PREPA, what is the board doing to expedite this bankruptcy? How much longer do we have to wait? Because we infer that this process is delayed.
So on the issue of federal fund reduction, these are speculative. And last year we thought something would happen, they didn't happen. The government's working on the next budget, so we have to be mindful of that. We've built budgets that are responsible, and we can manage through most things. And the example was last year, or a couple months ago, we were dealing with reductions potentially in the bond program, right? And we had built some safeguards in the budget to be able to manage it temporarily. The biggest funding reduction that Puerto Rico will face is the potential Medicaid reduction, because we know that expires. What we don't know is what will take its place. Will it be the exact same number or some reduced amount? What we do to mitigate against that is control costs, build reserves. We even built a very small Medicaid reserve last year. We probably need to build more. And all you can do for those things is build a transition in the event that there's reductions, and then you'll have to reevaluate and what you do with the budget. Revenues are currently strong, which if we don't spend that money, gives us a buffer to be able to manage these. And that's what good fiscal management is being able, not spending every dollar, so when a crisis happens, then you have to go back, cut funds, cut programs. We have the ability to manage through some of these, at least on a temporary basis, so the government can be thoughtful with the legislature about how you deal with those things long term. That's why we raise the issue of the Medicaid cliff now, because we know that it's coming in a year and a half. And the first step is work with the government in Washington to make sure that the decision makers understand what the implications are for the people of Puerto Rico, so that they can act with that knowledge. And then in the event that it impacts us in a negative way, we'll have to manage that. But that also goes to why you want to control spending, don't do irresponsible budget increases, make sure you have revenues that can take the place of some of the federal funds if they go away. So it is all part of the responsible budgeting, and we're working very closely with the administration, and they understand it. I think you heard the budget director actually say today, right? They're looking at the risks and trying to manage the budget, keeping an eye towards those risks, and I think that's a very good development and something that Puerto Rico has not done in the past.
Hey, Robert, can I just add to that? I've been through many of these cycles throughout my time in government, as has Robert and others. But it's so important to understand that Puerto Rico, the finances of Puerto Rico now are operating in a rational way, right? I mean, that's why we build up budget stabilization funds. We have reserves. It's not perfect at this point, but we're much better equipped to deal with economic cycles and federal funding changes than the Commonwealth has traditionally been. So this is not uncommon to what's happening in all other 50 states and the other territories. And it's important that we continue this path, because right now the board's in place and we're watching these, we're forecasting them, we're looking at them, we're working with the federal government. But at the end of the day, this stuff needs to be sustainable for Puerto Rico to be able to continue long-term and have success long-term. So these are exactly why we need to do what we're doing and what we've been working on.
Thank you, John.
I guess to address the first and the third question, as to how each of us feel, my reaction would be, the answer may be interesting, but it's not really relevant to the outcome. And what I think we will focus on through our attorneys is responding to the court as they will and have required responses to be filed, and address it really within the court process.
Thank you, Judge.
As to the third issue about moving forward with the Prepper case, I think it was mentioned earlier that the administrative claim dispute, which is a significant dispute in the case, is moving forward. There was a recent order by the court regarding discovery, and at the same time, the mediation process continues. And I would assume that both that posture of the administrative claims and other issues within the court will move forward as the mediation process also moves, hopefully, to an agreed resolution.
Okay. Gracias. Continuamos con...
Moving on with Oscar Serrano from Noticel.
Y feliz Navidad a todos.
Gracias.
Mi pregunta tiene que ver con el contrato de New Fortress. Las aprobaciones que se dieron de parte de la Junta incluyen la expectativa, the expectation, de que el gobierno va a evaluar el acuerdo de los muelles para desarrollar alternativas a ese acuerdo de los muelles con New Fortress para poder tener más competencia en el suplido de gas. La pregunta concreta sobre eso es qué facultades legales, qué poderes de la Junta ustedes podrían desplegar para atender esa evaluación que haga el gobierno, o si es simplemente que a ustedes se les va a informar, porque no hay nada que puedan hacer.
At this point, there's a legal contract that exists between the ports and NFE. And there's been nothing provided to the board that suggests that that contract is not enforceable. There is a provision in that contract that's clear that says that if for economic development reasons, Puerto Rico has an ability to make changes to the contract. And I don't know the exact clauses. I can send them to you. But there's also things that have to do. You have to provide alternative access. You'd have to compensate them for it. And what we're saying in there is the government should review that contract and those clauses because this is a 7-year contract with a potential for renewal, and anything can happen during that time. And they should be aware of all of their legal powers under that contract to make changes if that changes are necessary. Someone else, asked a question about the fiscal stability of the fuel supplier. Right? Anything could happen. So what we don't want to do is be in the exact same position 7 years from now with few alternatives. So this is where we are today, and that contract's in place. But we think the government should start to look at those things. Otherwise, you're having the same conversation 7 years from now. Now, perhaps the markets have changed. Things have changed between now and then. But that was the purpose of that clause, because the board was really restricted in terms of how you can create market competition for the port with that clause there, because even other suppliers, right, were restricted. A victory in that contract was actually getting the tolling agreement, however, and putting that in place for in the event there is an inability. But that was the purpose of that clause. The government negotiates contract. The government enters into the contracts. So we are not, part of that negotiation process. We review the contracts after the fact, but before they're executed, right, to make sure. And the reason we got stuck on this contract is because it did trigger one of our review thresholds, which is, does it promote market competition? And then after evaluating the contract over time and exhaustively, that port issue, right, became the biggest obstacle. And that's why that clause is in there. We really wanted them to review it, see what all of their options are, to promote as much competition as possible, to reduce costs. At the end of the day, that's the goal. The goal at the end of the day is to get the lowest price for the LNG as possible under market conditions.
Seguimiento breve. Respetuosamente, creo que no has contestado la pregunta porque la
Thankfully, you haven't answered the question. These issues that legal factors can be exercised in that contract. The board pointed out that original port contract was not submitted to the board for review because at the time it was done, New Fortress didn't exist. And at some point, you also requested information regarding the contract. Have you already concluded that under your powers you cannot enter into that contract, or do you believe that still under your powers you can enter into that contract?
I think the issue was that the contract was not submitted to our approval, and then upon review, the information was sent to us. The contract is not over $10 million, so it wasn't subject to the contract review process at the time. So to then say 7, 8 years later that we're going to open up the contract because we wanted to review it, even though at the time it wasn't at the $10 million threshold, and today when we reviewed it again, it's still not at the $10 million threshold, right? There wasn't a basis for us to review that contract or for the government to have sent it to us. I believe that was the determination that we made with regard to reviewing that contract recently in the last 6 months.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? Continuamos con reorg.
Any other question? We continue with Jan Marina up.
The White House can make 3 more, the 3 vacancies of the members who didn't sue. The White House can make those nominations. I'm just wondering if the White House has done that. And if not, if the board cares to comment on the 6-month lapse in time between the dismissals and the firings. And also, if you could discuss maybe the chairman, member Nixon or Mojica, about how the uncertainty over board membership is affecting the board's work or PREPA restructuring strategy.
Go through let me answer the questions. At my age,
sure.
I forget things. So go through the questions one at a time.
Yeah, it's our understanding that the president can make 3 nominations to the board for the members he terminated who were not involved in the litigation challenging those terminations. Just wondering if the White House has informed the board about its plans in that regard. And if not, if you care to comment in the lapse of, it's like 6 months since the firings.
All right. With respect to the first question, the first part of the question, the answer is no. With respect to the second part, it's also no. No, we haven't heard it. To my knowledge, there's no communication we've heard about it. And secondarily, I don't think it's appropriate for us to comment on it, at least from my perspective.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add a couple of things. I mean, obviously, you know, there's been a cycle here that we've gone through. And I just want, I mean, you asked, you know, how's it impacting the board's work? I mean, I think it's important to note that we've done everything we can to keep the work of Puerto Rico moving forward. Clearly, while I was acting alone for a couple of months, we were able to do that. There are certain things that we can't do. I think you're aware of all of that. But we are moving forward, and we're doing the people's work here in Puerto Rico. You know, now that we have 4 members, we can certify budgets and do those things. So clearly, we're not. I don't view this is my personal view. We're not operating at crisis mode while they sort things out. It's important to note that we are intact. We always have been intact, even as a quote single board member. Or when I was acting alone, we were operating within the law, and we kept the work going forward. Has it been a disruption? Obviously, it would be optimal to have a full board because obviously we're a non-paid part-time board, and so it does put quite a bit of pressure on us who are here trying to do the work. But at the end of the day, you know, we are moving the people's work forward, and I wouldn't take a belief at all that we're not making sure that things are happening. So.
Okay, thanks. Just a quick follow-up. With the 4 members, can you do everything you need to do regarding the PREPA restructuring?
Regarding the PREPA restructuring?
Yeah, like, I mean, is there anything the board can't do with 4 members?
I do not believe so. Regarding there are some minor exceptions outside of the Title III issues that you would need more than 4 members for, but they're not relevant to the PREPA, as far as I understand. So I would think not.
Okay.
Well, thank you. If there's no more questions, we conclude this press conference. Muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias.